colleagues for this, pull this. Also, to thank staff for putting this before us. It's something that I've been calling on for a while now, and I'm glad it's finally here. I was disappointed it's on consent, but of course we're able to pull it and have this discussion. And I wanted to talk about sort of the major issues that are presented in here. And the first being staff changes, second being overtime, third being the strike team participation. So first, with respect to the staffing changes, so one of my concerns in moving from 4 to 3 was the reduced services, particularly in instances where you'd like to have 4 on a scene immediately, which was the old system, versus having 3 and having to wait, and in instances where that matters. And the Appendix A here, which discusses compares the Eel Street and Marina Circle fires, I'd really like to delve into that because I understand in the staff report, it does a good job. And I'd have to say, to be quite honest, I found the staff report to be, and I do this for a living because I'm a lawyer, I try to write persuasively, but I found it to be written almost as if it were making an argument, written with a certain amount of persuasion in mind. And one of those was the staffing changes, which, the first part of the staffing changes talks about, the benefits, and then it sort of talks about how there's, it says, finally, there is no evidence that the staffing changes have created an unsafe condition for the city and its firefighters. And then there's an analysis of a certain fire, which has come up in the community, and that's attached as Attachment A. And just to focus on the Marina Circle fire, because I want to make sure I just understand, what happens here, because this was my exact concern in voting for this, or voting against it, I should say, is so there was a 3-person engine 32 that arrived on the scene at 2 a.m. and then it was another 3.5 minutes before any other personnel arrived, right? So in that 3.5 minutes, under the old system, the team could have gone in to the house, okay?
Yes, that's correct.
So, and under the new system, they had to wait 3.5 minutes. 3.5 minutes that, more property is lost. And possibly, just to make sure I understand, because this came up last time, is it's my understanding that if that 3-person team does not know whether or not there's someone in the house, they cannot go in because they need that 2 in, 2 out, right?
Yes. So for clarification, OSHA's 2 in, 2 out requires exactly what you state: 2 people in for 2 people out, with the exception of concern for whether or not there is life at risk. That decision comes to the company officer on that first arriving engine based on things that they see as possible signs of occupants. So things like vehicles in the driveway, time of day, day of week. All these different factors play into a decision-making process that is required when you switch to a 3-person company, where with the 4-person company, that decision-making process doesn't necessarily have to exist. Does that make sense?
Right. Right. But I just want to clarify that, the staff report says that, I'm pulling it up here for the exact language, but, I read it there. It talks about how, there's no evidence that the staffing changes have created an unsafe condition for the city and its firefighters. But I would argue that Marina Circle fire kind of highlights, a possible unsafe condition.
If I can kind of,
and just forgetting for a moment the details of the Marina Circle, just looking at it in principle.
Yes, absolutely.
I think
in principle, the decision on 3 versus 4-person staffing comes down to a couple factors. One is community risk. One is a community's willingness to pay for a level of service. And I think that's part of what we're looking at in terms of this whole process that we've gone through, that the Davis Fire Department has gone through over the last year, which is a decision that the community makes and really puts in the court of the council, which is what is the risk to the community, and then how much risk are they willing to assume, and then how much are people willing to pay for the service.
Yeah, and I understand that calculation, and, of course, I respectfully disagreed with the majority on that one, Councilmember Lucas Ferris as well, and was willing to take less risk.
Understood.
And so I appreciate that.
You bet.
So that was on the staffing, and Lucas, I don't know if you had any questions on the staffing, but I was going to move on to the overtime issue. Okay, so overtime. So one of the arguments put forth about overtime.
Actually, Dan, yeah, why don't you go ahead on the overtime?
No, okay.
But if we organize this by staffing, then I just wanted to clarify something though. Actually, why don't you go? Do you want to go to the overtime first? And it's your item that you pulled, but I did want to clarify.
Okay. So overtime. So one of the arguments about moving. One of the arguments that came out about moving from 4 to 3 was that we would see reduced overtime. Correct? So.
Yes, that's my understanding.
And so,
again, it is a little challenging for me to speak on some of these issues given the fact that we've only been in this agreement since January 1st.
Well, and I totally understand that, Nate. Basically, overtime hours for the first 6 months of the calendar year of 2013 were 10,000. And then if you look at how much overtime was saved, or the reduced amount of overtime in the second half, was 9,295, which is a reduction of just 1,000. Okay. A good chunk of which came about because we pulled out of the strike team participation. We were not participating in state strike teams.
Correct.
Okay. I'll get to that in a sec. That doesn't seem like a huge savings to me in overtime.
If you take a look at the chart that's up here, that was, first of all, after we canceled strike teams, there weren't any more opportunities where we would have been going on strike teams anyway. Secondly, if you look at the non-strike team hours, you can see that after the staffing shift, we went from 9,700 non-strike team hours down to 7,892 strike team hours, and you can see it would have been lower, but you can see there was far higher sick leave and vacation leave in the second 6-month period.
I'm going to get to that last point in a second. But on to the strike team participation. Maybe I missed this at the council level, but this council did not decide, unless I'm mistaken, to pull out of the state strike team participation. That was made at the administrative level, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I don't know how my colleagues feel about that, but I have some real concerns about the city not participating in state strike teams. So today, I'm the deputy county counsel in the county of Solano, and we spoke before our board today about drought, and we're going to have a drought presentation at our to us later in this agenda, probably at like 2 in the morning. But one of the governor's points, he issued this 20-point drought declaration, and one of the governor's points is that CAL FIRE, the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, will hire additional seasonal firefighters to suppress wildfires and take other needed actions to protect public safety. So it seems like, certainly compared to last year, there's going to even be more of a concern at the statewide level over fires. And when we get a call, essentially, from the state saying, we need your help, we're going to tell them no. Is that correct?
No, that was just a policy we implemented last fall. Doesn't have any impact on this year.
We just had a discussion this last week, the city manager and I, and this is, I guess, a good forum to announce it, which is we're going to resume DFD's participation in out-of-county statewide strike teams. The important issue, I believe, associated with this is that my understanding, the previous fire administration, the concern was around firefighter safety. That was the way that it was brought to the forefront, was exhaustion, fatigue, and other risks due to the amount of overtime that was happening. So as we move forward with strike teams, I want to reassure council that we will be sure to monitor that. And when we do send out units, making sure we don't overcommit on resources is something that we are going to continue to be mindful of. Yeah. But if a call comes tomorrow for help in Southern California, Northern California, DFD will roll out and respond as part of the statewide mutual aid system, as they have in the past.
Well, I appreciate hearing that because I was going to suggest that I was going to essentially make that motion. So I appreciate hearing that because I think it is very important, especially in this time of very dry conditions.
It's the right thing to do.
And I've talked to, I get what you're saying. I've talked to firefighters in our community, and they do want to participate. I think they do want to go on these strike teams. So understand that. Then just one final point, and then I'll yield the floor here, is, and this is directed more at Steve because he had just said that and his name's on the staff report, but I was very disconcerted by your sentence at the end of overtime saying, of the overtime section saying, it is interesting to note that once the staffing levels were reduced, making the extra firefighter 2 available for coverage of the first vacancy, that the sick and vacation usage increased, which you referred to, which is an insinuation that the firefighters are taking more sick leave and vacation time on purpose. Well, yeah, I mean, because of this new policy I just want you to explain that sentence a little bit more. And I found it very disconcerting, again, getting back to trying to get unbiased information presented to us, that was in there. I thought it was inflammatory. You know, I mean, I think what it insinuates is very, very inflammatory. I'd like you to sort of talk about that.
Well, point taken. I'm sorry if it seemed inflammatory. We're just doing a data analysis and pointing out the disparities in the data.
Okay. That's all from me.
Okay. Lucas?